My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here today with Mark Sturges. It's November 12th, 2024. We're meeting Mark via Zoom from his home. And Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. Our first
Thanks for having
question,
me.
first question, as you know, is why wine?
Um, it, it's kind of it's funny thing that kind of influenced me was we're a we're an old pioneer um, farming family from Carmichael, which is just outside Sacramento. We started out with 1,000 acres in the 1850s, and so my ancestors did a lot of things. They they messed around. They made wine from time to time, and um, but the thing that probably that that put the bug in was years ago in the 70s. My parents they were well, my mom was a heavy duty Presbyterian. My dad wasn't, but with their church group, they started doing these wine tastings in the Napa Valley, which I thought was kind of out of character. I mean, my dad didn't even drink, but all these people said, "Oh yeah, we're going to Napa and Sonoma," and you know, okay. And so then I I was in the army, and they were still doing these things, and so um, by that time, I got out of the army, and my mom had died, and but so I just kind of got into you know being a farm kid. I was always a farm kid. My first job was knocking almonds at the neighboring farm to ours when I was 14, and in the 19 early 1960s, there was no mechanization. And so you climb these trees with these big rubber mallets, and you knock the almonds uh, onto the canvases that were strung out. And it was Sacramento. It was hot. You'd get all this stuff down the back of your neck, and it wasn't a real fun job. And so my first off the farm job when I was 16, um, I um, I sold subscriptions to the Sacramento Bee door to door with the newspaper boys. And so at an early age, I knew how to make cold calls. I mean, we went all over Sacramento County knocking on doors and in good sections and bad. And so I always um, I always wondered, well, what am I going to do with my life? I'm a um, I'm a really good visitor, and so that kind of got me in down the sales thing. And I did that from the last 2 years of high school till the first 2 years of college, and then after junior college, I wanted to go to the best duck hunting school in the West Coast, which I thought was Chico State, and I did really well duck hunting, and I was a really good duck caller, but academically I didn't do so well, and so I flunked out and got drafted. When I um, when I got out, my little brother was going to he was just graduating from high school, and he was going to Tahoe to be a ski bum. I said, "Well, how about if I come?" And he said, "Yeah, great." And so he skied, and I was going to ski, but instead I started cooking, at this restaurant, and so we had some wine there.
And what year was that?
That was 1972, and so then I met these people. Jan was a waitress at the Spaghetti House, and her brother was was the dishwasher, and they were really good people, and they lived in Oregon. And so when the ski season was over, they said, "Hey, why don't you come visit us in Oregon?" And so I went up there, and so Greg was just he was kind of getting into baking bread, and their dad was a great guy. He was a dentist, and so he'd been making wine for I don't know maybe a year. And so we were in a hike in the woods, and we had this wine and cheese and Greg's bread, and the wine wasn't bad. And they lived in Forest Grove, and so that was kind of my introduction to Oregon wine. Um, oh, and so on the way home from there, my I had a brand new Blazer at the time, and outside Ashland, for some reason my truck broke down, and so it took 4 days for him to figure out that the transfer case was just low on oil. And so, but in the meantime, we just hung out in Ashland, and I was thinking about going back to school at Sac State, but I said, well, um, you know, it's my mom and dad. My mom had lupus, and they'd been in Ashland a lot because they were going to this healer, and so they talked about Ashland all the time, and so I started checking Ashland out, and so I decided to go to the campus one day, and so I went into the registrar's office, and the registrar himself was there, and I told him I was thinking about going back to school, but my grades weren't so good. And he said, "Well, we could get you, we could accept you with a 2 point. You have a 2 point, don't you?" I said, "I don't think so." And so Bob Bob Davidson took 2 or 3 Fs off my transcript from Chico State, and I got accepted with a 2.07. And so amazingly enough, for the first time in my life since when I flunked out at Chico, and I had my AA degree, I'd taken all my undergraduate classes. So for the first time in my life, I was just taking classes that I wanted to take. So I was just taking nothing but literature and creative writing and a couple other things. But so um, I went from a 2.07 to I think the rest of my college career, I got 1C, few Bs, mostly As. And so then I was, but we were only getting $225 a month on the GI Bill at that time. And so I went back to work. And so I was working at this place called the Cheshire Cat, which Dick mentioned the other day in his interview. And it was just down the block from this restaurant called Lithia Grocery. It was going through a transition. It was a hippie grocery and restaurant, and Lance had bought those people out, and so Lance, so I was cooking with Lance, and one of my main jobs was I'd go down to Cheshire Cat. He'd give me the money, And so I'd get cheese and the wine that we were going to drink on shift. And that was pretty new to me. And because when I was working in Tahoe, it would get so hot in that kitchen that we'd say, we'd send to the bar for a table 24. And so we'd get sent these Coors on draft, but it was so hot in there that we didn't even feel it. And so Andy didn't care. We could drink all the beer we wanted, but we couldn't have wine or any hard stuff. So here I am, and Lance is sending me down to the store to get wine or bubbly, mainly bubbly. And so the the cheapest thing that we ever drank was like a sparkling Vouvray. And so we were drinking pretty good stuff. Um, in those days, when I was going to when I first got there, it was called SOC, Southern Oregon College, and it was still a normal school. And then it became Southern Oregon State. When by the time I graduated, it was Southern Oregon State. Now it's Southern Oregon University. So then I started, always parts of my jobs wherever I was cooking was I'd I'd set up the wine list, and so then I went to after Lithia, I went to work for this place called Omar's, and Omar's was a historical restaurant. It still is, um, but these guys that had just bought it. They were also they owned a restaurant in Tahoe at the same time I was there, and so they moved and bought this place. Uh, Omar's has been there since the 40s, and it's the only bar on Oregon State land. And when these guys bought it, these guys were paying him off. I mean, they were paying him off, these guys. And so it turned out that these guys were counterfeiters for years until they got caught. So Roller and Mercer and Wiley, they were just innocent, you know. But we got to be pretty good friends, and I'm still really good friends. Mercer died, and when um, when I went to his wake, it was I don't know in the early 2000s, as I recall, the same people were sitting on the same bar stools as in the 70s. So um, so Roller and Bruce they bought Porter's in Medford, and that was another famous place. They just sold they just sold Porter's a couple of years ago because they never really could make it after COVID. All employees made it, but they couldn't make any money anymore. So went from there to um, I was going to school and graduated, and by this time I decided that and I knew all these people that were going to India, and they'd been to India, and some of them were going back, and uh, and so I was at that time I was living out in the Applegate, um, just house sitting, and I was talking to this one lady, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to India. You want to go?" And I go, "Yeah, I guess so." But I said, "Well, I don't have any money," and she said, "Well, you know, just you got 2 or 3 months to make the money, and and I talked to this one guy, maybe it was a couple guys, and they'd traveled on their GI Bill. And so I still, when I flunked out, I was a junior in college, and so I still had 4 years of GI Bill left when I got out of the Army. So I used two for my undergraduate, and so then I I was cooking at so I got so I was cooking at this at Lithia uh, once again, and I also was commuting to Sacramento on a Trailways bus. So I'd cook 30 hours and get on the bus like at midnight after a Saturday night shift, ride all night, and then Dad would pick me up in the morning at the Trailways bus station, and then I'd drive tractor from morning till night to Wednesday, and then go back to Ashland, and then do it all again. And I did it for a month. And then I'd go to school sometimes too, since I was going to school full time. And I was making more money than I'd ever seen in my life. But after about 30 days, or month and a half or something, I was with some friends at Lithia, and we were just kind of hanging out. And somebody said something funny, and I realized it was the first time I'd laughed in a month and a half. So, so then I headed out, and I was supposed to fly with this same woman that asked me if I wanted to go, but at the last second, her mom decided she wanted to go, so she was going to fly into Bombay or into Delhi, and so since so I was good. So then I was supposed to meet him in Delhi by taking a magic bus from Athens. And so I go, yeah, okay. And so I met up with this other guy of the group. And so I met him in Athens. Well, I flew into to Zurich and then hitchhiked through Austria and Switzerland and halfway through Yugoslavia. Um, and then you know, in the last 5 days before I got to Zagreb, I didn't talk to one person that spoke English, and I obviously didn't speak any of Slavs. And it was 6 months after Tito had fallen, and so things were kind of weird. And so then I took a train from Zagreb to Athens, and I met Tom there, and then we uh, we went to we went to Corinthos, where this other buddy of ours, who's Greek, who went to school with us, he was home for the summer with his parents, and so we stayed there for about 3 weeks. I got along great famously with his father. His father didn't speak English, but he owned a bookstore. And so we talked about books all the time, and we communicated incredibly well. And we knew what each the other were talking about. And so I just hang out walking around Corinthos all day. And so you couldn't walk down the street without some Greek guy motioning into his house to to serve you some Retsina from under his sink that he'd made. Or if you were lucky, he'd pull out some five-star Metaxa. And so, and then at night, Velocity and I, we'd go to these restaurants and drink these great red wines. They were really robust, but they had great body and great aftertaste, and they were just perfect wines for the Greek food. And so then it was time to go. Well, And so I go, well, Velocity, I'm gonna head for India tomorrow. And he goes, well, how are you how are you gonna get there? I go, oh, I'm taking him. I guess I'm gonna take a magic bus. And he goes, you're not going overland, are you? I go, yeah, that's the way magic buses go. He said, well, the Turks will kill you. And I go, well, you know, I'd never experienced hatred. I'd never experienced just born hatred like that because he was Greek and there was the Turks. Because it was like, you know, I was in the army in Arizona, and we didn't hate Mexicans because they were Mexicans, or we didn't hate Canadians because they were Canadians. But he goes, you really shouldn't do this. And so I went back to Athens, and I went to this place where you signed up for the Magic Bus, and until I paid my $100, I didn't know if I was brave enough to do it. Go through all these countries, you know, Iran, Turkey, Afghanistan, and all those guys back at school when we were hanging out, they said, well, when you get to Europe, it'll be kind of like here. It'll be fun, but you know, but when you cross into Eurasia, that's when your adventure will start. And it actually started before then because when we were leaving on this on the Magic Bus, we were going on the outskirts of Athens, and the bus was missing and stuff. And while it was missing, um, he he had always had a stereo blasting, and he was playing Street Survivor by Leonard Skinner that had just come out. And I don't know if you knew about that album, but right after they released that album, the plane crashed, and the album cover was just flames because everybody died in that plane crash. And so that's what's playing as on the bus, uh, jamming as we're leaving Athens, and the bus isn't running very good. And so we keep driving along, and then we get to the outskirts of Athens, and we'd heard all these fireworks and stuff, and we figured that's where it was, just fireworks. And somebody said, "Oh, there's some um, there's something happened with the students and stuff." So we pull up to this checkpoint as all these cattle trucks are going by full of troops. Besides us Americans, it was half Germans and half English, and they were all about 23, 24 years old. And so we get stopped at this checkpoint, and one of the American girls gets off the bus and wants to take pictures of all these troops and stuff. And so she got back on the bus, and by the time we got to Istanbul, um, the bus was really, it had stalled out like 4 or 5 times. And we were pushing the bus, and it was a big bus. It was a Bedford bus because all these guys that buy these buses in England, these worn out buses, and then drive down to Athens and get a bunch of hippies like us, pay $100, and then you were on your own. He drove the bus, but it was uh, it was not a five-star luxury bus. We got to Turkey, and I mean, finally got to Istanbul, and so they worked on the bus for 3 days there, and we were hanging out at the pudding shop, and it was the same time that the Midnight Express came out, the movie about Billy Hayes, and and that was kind of meant that movie really meant something to me because um, it was a pretty big thing in, I think it was 75 or 76. These three young people from Coos Bay got busted right around the same time as Billy Hayes in the pudding shop buying hash. They um, and so they were in prison in Ankara after 3 days, and these couple of people bought some hash at the Blue Mosque, and these guys, this one guy, um, this this other guy, I forget where he was Italian, and he spoke 5 languages, but he didn't speak Turkish, and so they were all there. They were in handcuffs on the ground, and so these Turkish guys came by that had been working in Germany. And they said, "Oh well, these cops just want to get paid off." So suddenly, $200 materialized with these guy out of these guys' pockets and stuff. And so we were uh, we were on our way again. And then once again, the bus was just it was still running really bad. And we stopped at this place. And so um, these guys, these in this small village, they said, "Well, we can fix the bus." And so everybody was real in this really small. It was like a garage, uh, not where they're working on it, but we were all in there with all these people, and we're going, "Whoa, this doesn't feel that good to be in this place with all these people." And so then the bus was actually fixed. These Turkish guys had it the fuel line was rotten all the way from the gas tank to the engine, and all these other people couldn't find it, but these guys did. And so we were driving, and we stopped at this place called we were in Anatolia, which is a really not a real stable state at that time. And so we came to this place where we're going to spend the night. It was called Havoc. And so the first thing is this guy came on the bus, and this big guy where we were staying, and he uh, he wanted to buy these two German girls on the bus. And so Doug, he always called me the cowboy, but Doug was the real cowboy, um, the the bus driver from England. And so he threw this guy, this truck driver, this Turkish truck driver, he threw him off the bus, said, "Don't come back." And so uh, we were just kind of wandering around this little hostel or whatever it was. And so the next morning, we wake up, we had slashed tires. And so Doug fixed the tires. And so then we're driving along another checkpoint where we were gonna get fuel. And so this police car comes flying around us, and the truck driver is with this chief of police. And so they want to charge us just a really exorbitant amount for the fuel, and they were gonna arrest Doug and take him away unless he paid him $100. And so he'd spent all the money that he could afford on fuel, and so we go, um, well, okay, let's get let's get a let's get it together, give him the $100. And all these English kids and German guys, screw him. He's the one that got us into this. Um, let 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 him get it out and go, no, that's not how you operate in the wilds of Turkey. So we got the $100. We had to force these guys, me and the two me and the American Keaton um, from New Orleans and Rolf, the Swiss guy, engineer. So we had to browbeat these guys into getting the money. So we paid the money on our way. We got to Iran. We went to this bathhouse. And it's the first time we'd been able to take a bath or a shower or anything for days. And so then we got to Tehran. And so by this time, Keaton and Rolf said that they'd met these two German guys that they were traveling on this Afghan bus that was really fast, and it was a black market Afghan bus. We'll go with these guys, and we were going to pay them, I don't know, something. And so then these guys, they were going all over the place to sell all this crap they had in the bus. It was not fancy stuff they had, you know. It was like a low rent thrift store stuff that they'd had that they got from thrift stores going out of business or something. And so we'd go all over. We were within, you could many times we could see the Russian the Russian border. And so then finally we got to Kandahar, and we we left we stopped somewhere. Oh, we stopped in um, we stopped in Shiraz, and so we went to a rug merchant, and so in Shiraz, we talked to this guy, and this rug merchant was really a pretty amazing guy. And so he said, "Let me tell you who you guys are." Go, "Oh, okay." And he told Keaton that he was a grocer, which he was. He owned a grocery store in New Orleans. And he said to Rolf, "You're an engineer." And I said, "What am I?" He said, "You're a free man." And I go, "Okay, I'll accept that." And so at that time, we decided we'd leave the bus once again. And but Shiraz, I had a really strong feeling about Shiraz. I didn't know why, but so we left, and I can't really remember how we got to Kandahar. And then and this Afghan guy that was driving the black market bus, he always called me California cowboy because I had I had a Stetson hat and I had a mustache that went behind my ears, so it kind of scared. Um, I fit in really well with these guys. Um, so we got to Kandahar and we were staying at this hostel, and there was all kinds. It was bodies sleeping, and there was there's a Russian guy there. He wasn't very friendly, and it was the same time that the Russians had taken over Afghanistan after the spring coup. And so everybody there said, really be careful on the bus you take, make sure it's a fast bus. And there was all these people come around and say, oh, we got the fastest bus. And we got this bus, Keaton and Rolf and I, and we left in the morning because you wanted to get to Kabul before the 3 o'clock in the morning curfew. Our bus was not the fast bus. All these other buses were passing us, and so we were just. I mean, it was hot. It was the middle of summer, um, It was like 100 degrees, and I was smoking hash in the back of the bus with these guys, and so then we made this. So this guy started saying, um, "Pay me for this hash," and you never. That wasn't ethical. They never did that. So I said, no, no, I'm not. No, you invited me back in the back of the bus. And so then he gets out some Turkish lira, I mean, some Iranian lira with pictures of the straw. And he starts making like cutting throats. And so then we'd met these Belgian guys in Athens, this Belgian couple that had just come back overland. And they said, well, one thing you have to do on this trip, you go to the Grand Bazaar and you buy yourself a big, ugly knife. And but so you can usually bluff with that with that knife, but you don't bluff the Afghans. That's what you don't do. And so I had this big, ugly knife. And so we stopped at this prayer stop, and this guy started hassling me. And so I just before I left on the trip, I read The Death Ship by uh, by London, and where this guy was where the cook was where not the journalist had fallen overboard, got picked up by the death ship, um, was he had to threaten this cook that was going to kill him with a knife. And so here I am playing Jack London with this Afghan in the middle of the desert. And so then he leaves me alone. So we get back on the bus, and he's not saying really good things about me. And so we don't get to Kabul before curfew. So we're stopped outside Kabul. And the bus driver didn't like what was going on. So he made all the Afghans sleep outside, and Rolf and me and Keaton inside. And that went over really big. We were the first ones through Afghanistan after the spring coup with weak visas. The rest, you only. So after we were there for 3 or 4 days, and then it was time to go, and so I left Rolf and Keaton there because I had to meet Vicky in in Delhi at a certain time when their plane came in. And so I'm sitting in the front of the bus, and uh, there was these 4 American eye doctors going skiing in the Hindu Kush. And so they taught me so much about just the culture. Like, today, Russians aren't going to ever beat the Afghans. The Afghans will take on a tank with a flintlock. And they've been beating powers bigger than the Russians, since they beat the English. So we get to the Khyber Pass, and we get to Kondi Lodel, and I go to get off the bus for lunch, and this one guy, Chip Parker, goes, "No, you don't get off the bus here. This is the most lawless place on earth. You look outside, and there's like a warlord with his eye gouged out, with four guys with automatic weapons walking behind him." So, well, maybe you're right, Chip. Maybe I'll stay on the bus with you. And I flew from Amritsar to Delhi for that. And that was like, unbelievable speed after 3 weeks in the desert. Um, and I met up, and we went to it was pretty amazing that I got there. the same day as they flew in. They flew in like, 1 in the morning or something. And then we went to Taj Mahal, and then we took a train to Manali, and Manali was like a drop off point. Into if you wanted to go in Tibet, you could still go that way. We went back to Amritsar, and we met this guy um, who he was a deadhead that was coming back from when the dead played in the pyramids. So we met this guy, and he, we were always really straight. We have to sign in with your passport and stuff. You had to put down what your occupation was. Well, he'd put down like I'm a UFO pilot, and uh, and so we got to we were we went from Amritsar to Manali, and so he'd heard that the tomb of Christ was in Manali. I think it was Manali, but because it wasn't true what had happened, that he was really entombed in Manali, I think. And so we had to do all kinds of investigation. Finally, we're in this rickshaw, and we visited the tomb. We've seen where Jesus was, according to local legend. And then we get out, and we're back in this rickshaw, and this guy comes up to us, goes, "Oh, how you doing?" And then this deadhead goes to the guy, "Oh, are you a Sikh?" And it was obvious he wasn't a Sikh. And it was like instantly there was about 40 or 50 people coming. And I'm going, "Oh, no, 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 this man jokes. He jokes, he jokes." And so I talked her way out of it. And so then we got to Dal Lake, and we were living on this houseboat on Dal Lake. And Dal Lake was between, it was in Kashmir. That it wasn't in Manila, it was in Kashmir, where where the tomb was. And we get to Dal Lake, and in 47, when Kashmir and India split, when they kicked the British out, it was the British um, recreation spot where all the rich English people went for vacation. And so there's all these houseboats that were still left over from 1947 that these Indian people took over, and then they became the landlords, and they rent them to the hippies. And so there's all these people on houseboats would on boats would come up selling you stuff, and so then the other thing that we'd never experienced before was these these English people always had servants, so the servants were still there, and so here you were living with servants, and that I felt like it was a great loss of freedom, because these servants were always like about 2 feet away. And if you wanted to get bottled water or something, um, they'd take two chikara, the boats were called chikaras. You take two chikaras and two buses to get the bottled water and bring it back to you for nothing. And finally, we left, and we stopped at this. We took a train to Jaipur, which is the pink city, and Vicky bought all this topaz. We found this jewelry store. She bought this incredible topaz for, I don't know, it was pretty cheap. It was like, $100 or something. And so we got when we got to, no, we bought that up in Manali. So we got to Jaipur, we see all these jewelry stores, and they're, and Jaipur is the pink city. And we get there, and they want to, they have all this topaz for sale. And it's like 10 times, 12, 20 times what we paid for it. We go, we're going to be rich. We'll have to go back to Manali, which was an incredible journey, but it's okay. And it's okay that, you were, a zillion miles up on these roads where you could go off these cliffs at any moment. That's okay. We'll do it. And so we go into this one store, and this guy goes, "Oh yeah, that stuff's worth 50,000 rupees, but the owner isn't here. Why don't you come back in an hour when he's there?" So we go back, getting ready to be rich, and the guy looked at us and he laughed. He goes, "Nice glass." And so that was kind of a lesson along the trail. But anyway, so then we went to um, when we were there in Manali, we went to Dharamsala, and so we were staying these in Dharamsala. It is where the Dalai Lama was, and so we were staying in these hotels. And there was all kinds of hippies there. So Vicky wanted to see the Dalai Lama, and so we went there, and they go, "No, no, can't see the Dalai Lama," you know. And so then she goes, "I'm, you know, I bet if we tried harder, we could have done it." And so we were talking to somebody, and they said, "Oh yeah, um, the Dalai Lama really needs journalists right now because um, they're they're having such a hard time by the Chinese." And so I go, "Well, I'm traveling on my master's on international journalism. I'm an international journalist, I guess." So we got a 45-minute private audience with Dalai Lama. So we were um, we were there, and we were having this audience with this man, and I'd never felt such reverence or um, humility in my life. And we'd be talking, and he just suddenly he'd burst out laughing because of my mustache behind my ear. It was so long. He goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry, laughing at you." And I go, "Hey, it's great to be part of your laughter, Your Holiness. And my grandmother hates this mustache too." And so we were with him for 45 minutes, and Dickie asked him something about because she was on her way to see Rajneesh, and so she was asking about trust, and and so the Dalai Lama said, "Well, Buddha says you must trust, you must question everything, even Buddha himself." I'm going, "Do you hear that, Vicky? Do you hear that? What this man is saying?" She didn't, but anyway, we finished the interview, and we had some pictures taken, and I'm thinking, man, I've held it together for so long with this incredible um, human being. And we we hug um, and turned around and walked straight into a glass door. And so any, anyway, we left, went to the Rajani to see to Pune. And I always had this attitude that wasn't real popular with Dickie, is I'm my own master. And so there's 3 or 4,000, 5,000 Westerners at Rajneesh's ashram. And so we felt like and during that time, I met like 5 people that felt like I did. Like, how can you be giving your money to this guy? This guy's the biggest crook in the world. And but here you are, you're are these 5,000 people right, wrong, and I'm right. I was supposed to be getting my GI Bill money, but I hadn't been getting it for a long time. So I finally went back to Bon. I flew from Pune to Bombay on this really rickety plane to go to the American Embassy to get my um, or to American Express to get my money to keep going. And I get there and I find out that the uh, the VA had screwed up and cut me off. And so I called my dad and stepmom, and of course I didn't have any conception time. It was 3 in the morning, and so Betty goes, "Oh, sorry, Mark, VA cut you off." Well, not only did VA cut me off, but part of the deal was that SOC um, would cash these checks at each time when the VA money came. Well, they kept cashing the checks even though there's no VA money. So I was more than broke. And the thing that all these people said, all the people, said that we're going to be going to India and Vicky and all these people said, you never want to be broke in India. That's one thing you don't want to be. We were down there at this place. We ended up at this pretty nice looking beach hotel in Goa. Except these guys were hash and opium smugglers, and so every place, all the places that all the other hotels you went to, like I told you before, you had to sign in with your passport and stuff. You didn't have to in this place because they always figured that you would be smuggling hash or opium back to the States with you. And so I stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks. One day I was sitting at the desk, and there was always hash and opium to give to people that as samples, unless somebody came in that actually wanted to stay there. And so these people would come up and say, "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've smoked opium for every day for 30 days. What can I do?" And the guy that was running the hotel said, "Well, I don't know what you're going to do. You're the one who's smoking it. Do what you want to do." And I mean, no sympathy whatsoever. So one day, me and this guy were sitting out at the desk because it was kind of we are paying rent that way. Me and the guy from New Zealand. Um, so we're sitting there and we look out and there's 8 soldiers walking right across through the jungle right towards us. They were out 300 or 400 yards away, and we go, um, "We need help here." And so he came out and he said, "Oh yeah," and so the soldiers said that they heard that we were giving away socks, and so he told them that no, we're not giving away socks. But after that, and plus I found out that there was no more money, I just wanted to go home. I was supposed to go to I was gonna go to Nepal and but no, it's time to go. And it was Christmas, and when I got back, I I went to I was working at Omar's.
What
Like I
what y- what year was this?
this was this was, well, actually, I wasn't working at Elmer's at that time. If this was early 78, it was 6 months before the fall of Shaw. And so when I got home, the Shaw had fallen. And so so then I was still working on my master's. And so I needed to go back to go back to work. And so I was working at this place. I was working at Tommy's, and Linfield had become Tommy's. So I was helping him set up his wine list and stuff. And there was a wine event happening in Jacksonville called Vintage 83. And so I went to a lot of restaurateur friends of mine were part of it. And our booth, one of my friend's booths was right next to Elko. And so I became all day, and after that I became really good friends with Pat and Joe from Elko, Campbell from Elko. And so I stayed in touch with them, and then Mary Ann and I went to we took a trip up to Portland, um, and we went to a Bob, well, and then we split up. I was with this buddy of mine, this old college roommate from Ashland. She was with a college roommate from hers, from Ashland. And then we met in line at this Bob Marley concert. And so we stayed pretty much together after that. We got married a couple years later and decided that before we even got married, we decided that she'd go to nursing school at the coast, and I would I'd go to the coast and just write. And by this time, I'd finished my master's. And so we went to the coast. We went to Coos Bay, and I was just fishing and writing every day. And we were surviving on fish and crab and eels. And so I was good. You know, I was always a good fisherman. When you were depending on it, you become even better. So then I got a job cooking in Bannon. It was the worst job I'd ever had. So then these people that I went to school with in Ashland, they they owned a restaurant for 30 years in Bannon. So they said, come to work for us. So I gave them these people at this place called Delana's. They're the first people that I ever gave 2 weeks, 2 hours, or 2 minutes notice to. And they took the 2 hours. And so then I started helping them with their wine. And then this place down the street offered me a chef's job. And so I took over the wine list there and got Henny-Hinsdale to in there. And so then, so I was working there. And then at the same time, well, just before I went to work there, I worked the 84 harvest at Elko. And that was the worst harvest I've ever experienced. It was rain every day from morning till night. We lived our rain gear. The only time you didn't have your rain gear on was when you were asleep. And so everybody in 84 made pink wine, except for Bevel Heights. Made great Pinot that year. The only ones that I know of. And so I worked a little bit until and this whole time for 4 years, I'd been trying to get an interview with Henny-Hinsdale. And by this time, I didn't believe that Howard Hinsdale even existed. I thought, oh, they're just telling me that Howard does the hiring, but nah, I didn't, after 4 years, I didn't believe it. And so then another job came open, this brand new waterfront restaurant. And I was going to be their first chef. And so Howard, Howard, or somebody called me, maybe the salesman, John Cooney, that came down to the coast every other week or every 3 weeks or something. He told me that I was going to get an interview because some things were happening on the coast. They thought maybe they could do something. And I had done um, John John talked me into doing a survey. I had surveyed um, every bottle of wine from Florence to Brookings on the coast. Every bottle of wine, what everyone was. And so I gave him, I did it for Lemma. So I gave Lemma this 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 survey. Maybe it was through Lemma, but I gave Lemma this survey, and Lemma said, "Well, it's fine, but there still isn't a market on the coast. But we'll give you a case of wine. We'll give you a couple cases of wine for doing this." And I said, "Well, fine. Don't, but don't give me any Siskiyou, or don't give me another winery that I won't mention the name. That was kind of oaky. They gave me a case of each, and so so anyway, had made copies of this survey, so I gave it to John, and he gave it to Howard, and so I got an interview with Howard, and so so then I told Howard, like, you know, I wanted to work for you for a long time. I did everything I'm supposed to do. I worked in the winery. Oh, and I worked for this other distributor that Northwest Negociant that that Roller, the guys from Omar's, and 3 or 4 other people had gotten into. They had Boger Winery. I don't know if you ever heard of Boger, but it was by Placerville, and I think it's still happening. It was an old California winery from it was a gold rush winery from the 1850s. And Greg Boger and Susan Boger actually went to my same high school. They were a couple years ahead of me. And they made great wine. But the rest of it was pretty much the other blends they had. Their Northwest Negociant. I forget who made it for them, but it was bad. And so I had 200 or 300 cases in my boathouse in Bandon, and so I sold some Boger, placed in a couple lists, and then I couldn't get it anymore because Roller said, uh, um, "Jason scammed us. He left. He took all the money and moved to Mexico." So, so I even had it on my resume that I'd sold on the street. So Howard Hinsdale said, "Well, I'll let you know in a couple of days." And so when it was getting to where I was going to have to stay, well, you have to go to work at the Wheelhouse. He called. When he called, said, "Okay, Mark, we're going to hire you." It was like when I had racing pigeons when I was a kid. It was like waiting for racing pigeons. Were they going to come home or were they lost? They came through the sky. And it was really an amazing feeling. And the first day, I went to work on April Fool's Day. A friend of mine gave me a ride to Salem on April Fool's Day. And I thought I was going to a sales meeting. And so this sales meeting, when I got there, they go, "Okay, Mark, you're going back to Walton, which is between Florence and uh, and the coast." And Cooney broke down yesterday with a cube van full of Hillcrest Riesling for Joe Tang at the port side in Charleston. So So I'm driving this cube van. Never drove a cube van before, and so I do pretty good. 'Cause I'd driven deuce and a halves in the army. I'd drove tractor all my life, and so I could drive a cube van. It's a lot smaller than a 2.5 ton deuce and a half. Um, so I'm in Coos Bay, and some car just pulls out in front of me, slammed my brakes, and lost and had all this a big crash behind me, and I broke 50 cases of Hillcrest Riesling in my first delivery. I I I'd driven trucks, but I didn't know anything about load bars or anything, so I didn't have my load bar right. But got through that. Richard Summer was a good friend of ours. He'd spent he'd spent time over here picking mushrooms. I'm probably the only person that ever spent the night at Hillcrest Vineyards. Um, and so we, so I spent um, a lot of time there. And one thing that I did so well in my whole wine career was I was a great salesman. I could sell anything. And it all went back to my first job with Sacramento Bee, selling door to door. Cold calls are a lot of people are freaked out. Cold calls, they were nothing to me. And so one of the people that I became friends with pretty early on was the Castiles at Bethel Heights. They became really good friends of mine. And I spent, because a lot of times you had to come to sales meetings every other week, and you drive up there on a Friday night, and you didn't want to drive home after the sales meeting, because in those days hardly anybody spit. I was one of the first people that started spitting, because we'd drink all these great wines all day. You know, all these other distributors in those days, they wouldn't. They had Silkelbloss or or Honeywood or something, but they would never sample those wines. But here we were drinking first growth Bordeaux and um, Tattinger and Bollinger RD. And I remember one day we had a blind tasting um, against RD, um, Bollinger against, and it was the most expensive champagne at the time. And um, it was a blind tasting, and Bollinger RD beat it 49-1, or whatever our sales force was. Maybe it was 33-1. Um,
You're thinking
it
of
was
Dom Perignon? Dom Perignon?
Dom, yeah. It blew Dom out of the water. And those are just the kind of things we taste at sales meetings. Um, Robert Drouin was there one day, and we're drinking all these great burgundies, and he taught me that the thing about the difference between great white burgundy and practically every California Chardonnay was when you drink a great California Chardonnay, um, it's going to taste great like the first three sips, but it's going to taste that way through through the whole glass. Where when you're drinking, um, well, even Chassagne Montrachet or even Poussey, um, every every sip is going to get better from the first to the last as you're drinking that wine. And it was so amazing to to get education like that from from people like that. Trimbach was there. Trimbach was a great guy. Um, John Henny would always stop in, and one day, John Henny was in there, and we were talking about sales, and so I was talking like to the crew because we always taught about we as well as talking about wines at Henny-Hinsdale. The reason we control the market, we control all the fine wines, is we talked about sales as well, how to sell. And so I said, well, one thing that hit me today that we should talk about, John, is every single customer that you have, every single person that you meet is a customer. Like for instance, yesterday I was in the bank talking to the teller. I was talking about wine. So that bank teller you meet is a wine customer. And so Howard rushed over and slammed the door. And there's there's an OLCC auditor sitting right in the little cubicle outside the sales. Another time, we got to we got to meet all these great winemakers. One time, because Marianne and I traveled a lot on our own to these wineries to visit, and so one time we were down because I'd been with the company on a trip to Kenwood, and Kenwood we went by the ruins and we were tasting we were drinking Jack London in Jack London's house, and so I was, you know, Kenwood is a hero for me ever after that. So Marianne and I were down there on our own, and we went to Glen Ellen, and so we were talking to Joy Benziger, um, and so he said, well, we were saying, well, where should we eat tonight? Would you recommend? He goes, well, hold on a second. Why don't you come with me? And so we went into the MJ Vallejo house, and Bruno Benziger was there. And he goes, hey, Dad, can these guys eat with you guys at the grist mill tonight with that distributor from Arizona? Oh yeah, sure. And so we go there and we go upstairs to the grist mill. And the grist mill, I don't know if you've ever been to Glen Ellen, but it's been there since the 1800s. And a big creek or something runs under it. So it was a restaurant in those days. I don't know what it is now. But we go upstairs and there's all these narrow tables in a big L, and probably 50 feet of tables in an L where everybody's sitting on both sides of the table, and like butcher paper on top of the table. And so we had this great dinner, and so after dinner the wait staff didn't clear one plate or one wine glass, and we drank all these wines, and then Bruno's wife, because Bruno was in his 70s at this time, maybe 80s, I don't know, but his wife goes downstairs, and everybody starts going, walk of life, walk of life, walk of life, and so Bruno goes, no, I don't do that anymore. And no, they go, no, walk of life, walk of life. He goes, oh, all right. So he and the sales manager climb up on top of these narrow tables. And they each get at one end of their the respective tables, and they start prancing down between all the glassware and the plates and the silverware that's still on, and they come down, and a couple glasses got broken, but not much. And then these tables are hardly wider than my laptop, and they cross, and they cross, and so each one has to get the other end of the table from where he started. And it was, and you never forgot about Benziger wines after that. So that's the kind of experiences we had, where they always taught us, you gotta have these great wines to sell us. And that's one of the problems. And even after Henny-Hinsdale got sold, Miletus kind of kept that same thing until everything stayed pretty good. I said, well, I'll keep doing this until it isn't fun anymore. And because by this time I was selling my ecosystem compost all over the country, and I was you know I was probably the soil expert that at Henny-Hinsdale, and even the whole Oregon wine industry. Eddie um, bought the business, and then he kept doing the same thing. We still went on some great trips, and so then Druin. So then by that time, Druin had bought DDO, and like I was out visiting, and I was talking to Robert, and he and I were talking, and I was heavily into I was just getting into compost tea and saying, well, there's people that say compost tea can beat powdery mildew, and Robert laughed at me because yeah, that's funny, Mark. Powdery mildew is a tough one that compost tea isn't going to beat, and so that always stuck with me. And one other thing I'd like to say before we leave Henny-Hinsdale is we used to have these what was called the warehouse sales. And I don't know if you ever heard about those, but Howard and Karen and John had all these really valuable rare wines that were stored in the warehouse, and so we had these they were in there was all these racks all over the warehouse, and then there was the bottle room, which I had to work in because I was so bad at taking inventory that all the wine looked the same to me, all the boxes. And plus I had to get up at 4 in the morning to drive up there. So they didn't let me work on the floor, but I could work in the bottle room. And so under the racks of these were all these lay down cases. And so there'd be all these burgundies and champagnes and wines that they had. There was 3 bottles of in Oregon, things like that. And so we were getting ready the day before the warehouse sale, and and I pulled out this case of Italians. It wasn't. It was a three. It was a 3-bottle case, and it was a lay down. So I stood one of these bottles up, and it was it was an Italian wine of some kind. Like I can't remember what it was, but it was rare, and it got knocked over, and of course it broke. And Mike Rogers goes, "You go down on that wine troop, and you drink it off the floor. You don't waste any of it." And so I went down, and I found a place where it didn't look like there was any glass, and so I drank a lot of it off the floor. And so 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 Robert Druin was in there that day, and he and Howard were talking outside Howard's office, and I go, "Guess what, Howard? I just drank this Guerre some off the floor." You broke a bottle. They were both just stunned. They couldn't believe I drank that off the floor. So that was a pretty. And then we I got this. I sold more I sold more Burgundies per capita than a lot of people in Portland did, and per capita. And so I asked Howard one time, hey, could I sample a bottle of Jadot Infant? He goes, no, you can't sample Burgundies. Are you kidding? And so he thought about it, and and so he said, and he called me back. He goes, I've decided I'm going to send you down a bottle of Baby Jesus. And so the first place I went, I sampled the Baby Jesus, and I sold 6 bottles to Wedderburn Store, this this weird market on the Rogue River in 101. So we had a great trip to Burgundy. We had some great trips. I won a trip to the British Open, the first time Tiger Woods won, and and we and hanging out, just being able to hang out in Bone and drink Clos de Mouche in the vineyard, Blanc and red and I had I made it. It was my Christmas card for a while, in front of a Moussigny barrel, um, and so we were going through Chablis, and um, just row after row of rot, the worst rot I'd seen in my years in my wine career, until we came to Drouin's rows, and they were just immaculate. I mean, they weren't immaculate. They were kind of cover crops up to our knees. There was more beetles than than I'd ever seen, and me being a beetle guy, definitely loved that. And and it made me and Philippe Drouin had turned that vineyard that he was in charge of biodynamic, like 3 years before. And that made me even a bigger biodynamic fan than I was before. Even though I practice a form I've used preps and stuff before, but I just use a different ecosystem um, system in my compost than I know some of the biggest people in biodynamics. Well, uh, our friend at McMinnville, for instance. But anyway, so we came back there. Eddie took over. Was always really great to me, and but then and I kept growing the business even when it was Columbia. I mean, when I first took over the South Coast, my numbers were always 60 or 70% up. And so when I a 10% increase, I was pretty bummed at that. For Columbia, it was still pretty good. And then we stayed um, in the wine business. Like Dick said, we were always wine and dine. They were great to Marianne and I. And but when the Coors and Miller merger came, and we became basically Mount Hood, who we'd been beaten up on for years and years. Um, I said, no, this is it. And I just went to doing my compost business. But all those years with David Ladd and David Adelsheim and all those people, it just stayed with me, and it was still I was just still part of the industry. Um, Working with the Castiles in I don't know if you read this story, but the flat block of Bethel Heights, um, you know, Oregon never had a phylloxera problem because we were planted totally different than the Napa or Sonoma, where they would they would just have acres and acres and acres and acres of vineyards, so it could spread really fast. And so phylloxera came to Oregon very late. And so, so Bethel Heights never had any problems until because they built their whole vineyards they just grafted all their own vines and stuff. But they bought some vines, some Riesling at a nursery, and so that's where their phylloxera and the flat block came from. And Justin Hill had already been replanted, and Justin Hill is right above flat block. Because I've been trying to get Bethel Heights, Ted and Terry to go organic and stuff for years, and so Mimi comes home, and um, pretty soon, well, she's talking about biodynamics, and um, then um, then she comes down and says, "Hey, um, I've looked at biodynamics, but what are you doing?" And so we had her a brewer built, and so she bought compost, my inoculant, and so she went home um, and she took the flat block and and she did three applications that year. She started in the spring and finished in the fall, and and the phylloxera it leveled off, and then by the next year, it was either by the next year or by the second year, um, they were, and they went from 13 barrels in, I believe this is time frame. They went from 13 barrels to 6 by the time they started doing those tea applications. And then by by the second year, um, either the second or third year, they had to thin. And in my education, before this, you know, phylloxera had never never got a Bollinger vineyard, and it never got Portuguese vineyards, but they had really sandy soil, and so. But as far as we knew, and anybody we ever talked to, um, no vineyard at that time, none, there weren't any vineyards that had ever come back from phylloxera, and so we were pretty blown away. Um,
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I think let's talk about this other part since this is a good transition point to talk about the other part of your business, the compost and such. Tell me how that got started and how that became sort of the primary thing for you.
well, I don't want to. I'll start that, but in when we can't get through this thing without I'm talking about Momentazzi
Sure.
and and Bill Hansen, who has Libra and works as a sales manager um, for Stoller. Bill and I worked together for years at Columbia Henny-Hinsdale. And so Bill, when I retired, Bill said, "Hey, won't you just rep my wines on the South Coast?" Yeah, okay. Because I hadn't done anything with wine for 3 or 4 years. Said, okay. And so then about, 6 months later, he goes, "Would you do the same thing for Mo?" I go, "Well, okay." So we talked to Mo and we got that together. And so Bill's still one of my best friends. And so Mo has become really important to me. And so we, you know, we're all soil guys. We're all farmers and soil guys. And plus Mo Mo did Longhorns for his biodynamics, and I was a I was I was a cattle rancher for 15 years until 3 years ago. Anyway, so that's and then and then the guy that first got me into doing ecosystems and worms, he's one of my old college roommates, a teacher from Ashland, and he told me about 6 months ago, Mark, one of my students made this movie that you need to see, and I never got around to it. And I told him about that I was going to do this interview, and he said, "You got to see Som." I go, "Okay." So I watched. Marianne and I watched it last night, and so all of a sudden here's these guys talking about going Mount Ararat and Shiraz, and well, and Mo told me a long time ago he was from Shiraz, and he escaped on a motorcycle through the Khyber Pass. Basically he was following my trip when he made his escape. And so anyway, so that's basically what happened. I was traveling through Ashland about 2000, and Gabriel says, "Hey, come look at my my compost that I just got at a yard sale, and you can make compost, you can make worm tea with it and sell it at garage sales if you want to." I go, "Yeah, sure." And I took it home. I just threw it in my compost pile and went about my business. And the next time we're traveling through Ashland, um, we stopped in to see Gabriel, and hey, yeah, come look at my compost. And the second I saw his compost, I go, he had a 4x8 plywood bin, and I go, well, I got to have one of those. So I went back home, and within 6 months, I had six 4x8 um, um, composts. And then there was a Soil Food Web um, workshop in up by Eugene. And so I went to that, and I took my compost and some leachate, some compost tea that I had, and I gave it to them. And they go, "Whoa, we got to see about this." And so they came back down and said, "Well, this is some pretty incredible compost. The leachate isn't anything, but," which they were wrong. The leachate is very valuable. It's very, very rich, even though it's a anaerobic substance. And it's the leachate. The way I describe leachate is it's made like sherry. It's under anaerobic conditions its whole life. So when it drains into your containers, it just stays that way, just like sherry. So uh, then then within a short time, Gabriel's always he's an idea guy, and he says, "Well, um, you got to get rid of your wooden bins and start doing something else, because I don't those things don't look sustainable to me." And so he said, do concrete or something." And so he was right about the sustainability, because when we first started out, we went with the cheapest things we could make these bins out of. So you could make a bin for like $50. It would take you all day to screw it together with 3 sheets of fiberboard, and you could do it for $50. And you'd go to the hardware store and you'd buy to the mismatched paint section. So you'd get these gallons of paint that were the ugliest things you ever saw, and for $1 a gallon. So you'd slap 3 coats on, inside and out. And so they lasted for a while. But you always say, "Oh, my car is falling apart. It's bad." But your car isn't really falling apart. But when you say your bins are really falling apart, they were really falling apart, and they always fell apart when it was raining about 2 inches an hour, about 8:30 or midnight. When it always happened. But luckily, I live in the dairy industry around here that were going out, and so I started collecting these bulk dairy tanks from all these dairy guys that I knew. And so I had this guy that would get all my tanks for me. He was a heavy duty equipment genius. He builds all Kaiser's golf courses. And so he'd haul them in there. And he told me that I had more stainless steel bulk tanks than they had in Wisconsin. And so then I started doing this, and it was all word of mouth, and it just got it just kept getting bigger, and I started I met some one of these guys that came down to buy compost from me. He took Acres magazine, and I don't know if you know what Acres is or was, but Acres was the icon, the cutting edge of sustainable eco agriculture. And Chuck Walters started out about 1972. He was starting out at the same time as, you know, he was there with Rodale, and he'll go down in with Rodale and Sir Howard and all these people. He'll be there. And so I started going to these Acres conferences and meeting all these people. And Chuck Walters was a Beatle guy, and he didn't meet very many Beatle people because I was a Beatle person. Um, I was a dung beetle person, and so I got to know all these dung beetle people at the University of Austin, and Truman Fincher, who was the main dung beetle person in this country, who was the first. He got all these. He worked for USDA and Texas A&M, and so he got all these grants and stuff, and that so he was bringing all these. He was gonna reintroduce dung beetles to this country because we'd killed all the dung beetles in the last 50 years through our worming practices. And so he was going to reintroduce these dung beetle. So he brought them all. He brought them first to Australia, and then he brought them to Maui and a couple other islands. These dung beetles were really doing good in Hawaii, and so he was just getting ready to introduce them when USDA shut him down. They cut off all his grants, and it was a horrible thing what they did to him. And so I got to know him. I got to know all these people, and all these. So we'd go do all these. Well, I'd go. I did a lot of these dung beetle trips where I'd go to do these talks where I teach people how to get their dung beetles restored if they just stopped, that they had to stop worming. They had to stop using Ivermectin and Quest and these things. And the funny thing is I used to always teach all these people. I would go, well, when I'm worming my cows or my horses, I worm them all the time. I just do diatomaceous earth and vinegar and kelp um, and um, and molasses, or and I say I eat that every day. I say I said every time you give your cows, your horses ivermectin, you give yourself a jolt. They just look at me horrified, and I thought it was so weird, and I I I I taught so much against ivermectin during COVID. All these people come up, hey, are you going to do ivermectin? And I go, no. I've been teaching about ivermectin for 20 years. You're totally killing your microbiome with Ivermectin. And so so I wrote for Acres for 20 years, and I was Chuck Walters and I were we were good friends. The as he got older, he had macular degeneration, and so he was getting blind. And so I used to read him my poetry that I was writing every Monday over the phone, so he wouldn't have to have my poetry translated through his scanner. And so he and I were really close. And I kept writing for Acres for about 20 years before I came persona non grata. You know, I made some comments and I left. But it was a big hole in my life. Through the Beatles and through Acres and everything else, I developed these customers through the years. They're some of them are still buying my inoculant to make compost tea. One of the biggest people he controls, 20,000 acres of Montana and Idaho and Colorado. Another guy, Charlie Clark. That's Randy Thomas, who I think is one of the great agronomists in the country. Um, uh, Charlie Clark is one of the main compost seed golf course guys in the United States. He controls like some really big golf courses on the East Coast, and a lot of people have stayed with me through it. Now the people who I dealt with all those farmers for 20 years, and the most enlightened growers that I've come up against are the home growing cannabis growers, and I've got some 20, 30 acre hemp growers too. They're totally into organics, and they're big fish customers. I'm the Washington, Oregon organic gem fish hydrolase dealer. We it's made strictly with dogfish from the East Coast. It's a sustainable fishery.
You wear a lot of hats. This is an amazing amount of things you're doing. Is there any more of the wine story that you didn't share that you wanted to share?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's a story I definitely wanted. Two stories. One, a friend of mine who had a big drugstore wine shop called Tiffany's, and for a long time it was the biggest retail selection between Newport and the border. Well, he we were invited to this other buddy of mine who was a metal fabricator, who made my sifter and stuff, named Jim Guernsey. And Jim's been a collector from immemorial. Um, he's retired. He's about 65, I think. But anyway, he invited Marianne and me and Dennis to his 40th birthday party. And so his 40th birthday party, he had four wines that were 40 years old. He had Saint Michel, and he had Latour, and he had BV, and I forget what the other one was. We're drinking these incredible Chelichev wines. we're just all blown away. And so years later, I was at IPNC, and so all of a sudden I was at the alfresco tasting, and it was crowded, and all of a sudden it just started. There was silence. It was really, people were talking, visiting, and all of a sudden the silence swept the whole place. You just heard these whispers. It's Andre. It's Andre. And Andre was walking slowly, or whatever Andre was doing in those days. He was in his 90s. I don't think he ever walked slowly. He was, he was moving. And just everybody there was in awe. And I had never experienced that. And later on, the next day, we were in the vineyard, we were on a vineyard tour, and Andre was on our bus, and Cal Knutson was giving the talk up in Erath Vineyard, and he was talking away, and all of a sudden he stopped. He goes, "Andre, it's you! I don't believe it." And the only other reactions that I'd ever had to anybody like that was my audience with the Dalai Lama. That was the only two times in my life. The other vineyard story I'd like to tell, I forget about it, but is after DDO was built, we were all out there one day, and I was going through. I was kind of by myself. We were having lunch, and I was kind of walking around the winery, and on the bulletin board, because um, I think Veronique was there, and a couple other French guys were there, and so I was just kind of, I forget where I was, but I was kind of looking at this bulletin board they had, and they had this big newspaper article, and it said, "This is Oregon," and and I can't remember if I think it was a French newspaper, and it was a story. I don't know if you ever heard this story, but these two yahoos from Grants Pass decided that they got drunk and decided that they'd be William Tell, and so they one guy put a gas can on top of his head, and so the other guy, I don't know how far away he was, but he had a bow and arrow, and so he went to shoot the gas can, and he missed, and he shot the guy right in the forehead, and it went right through his skull and his brain, and came out the other side, and it didn't kill him. And so I said that the whole article they'd sent back to France. This is Oregon. This is where we are. That was one of my great stories, wine industry.
That's incredible. With the compost specifically, I'm curious about, obviously you mentioned you have clients beyond wine. What is the kind of the connection there with the Oregon wine industry? How has your compost work sort of influenced the industry here in Oregon?
Well, it's really influenced me. I mean, we ca- I we can't really stop talking about the Oregon wine industry without talking about um, Mimi Castile. Mimi, uh, Mimi. I mean, I watched her grow up since she's a kid, and Mimi is is one of the rock stars of Oregon. Um, Mimi has had a major influence um, on on the whole wine industry, not just Oregon. The the uh, the she's had a big influence with compost tea um, and fish, the organic gem with loop to loop wines in Washington. They're pretty amazing people. Mimi, she could consult with Opus One, Mondavi's. I mean, it just goes on and on. The swaths she's making. I just think of her, and I'm kind of in awe as to what she's pulled off. So she, along with compost tea and compost and fish, she's just had a major impact on the Oregon industry, as well as the California and Washington industry. So as the Oregon wine industry, we've uh, we've we've done a lot. I mean, it amazes me, like um, Myron, the people that bought his winery selling what they sell for, and the Castiles now they're organic now. Brick House and the 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 influence most had. Brick House is organic. I heard Nicholas Jolie one day. I heard Nicholas Jolie speak a couple of times. He's one of the gods in the war. Their property's been in the family since 900s AD, and he's been uh, he's been biodynamic for years. And every time that Nicholas would talk about dormancy or the creatures doing their work or whatever, he'd do a little pirouette. And he did so many pirouettes that day. And we've been talking about biodynamics, and he's doing his pirouettes. And but he said, the way I tell if a wine's really sound is I pull a cork, and in a couple of days I start tasting, seeing it's tasting, and you know I want it to go at least 2 or 3 days before it oxidizes, before it's sound. I only experienced that one other time in my life. Um, I was staying at Tom Dunn's. Tom Dunn was one of the earlier wineries. He had Glen Creek Winery. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but he was he was actually the first guy to make an 18 liter. And Tom came from at the time he came from money, and so he he had these big wine shops in California. He moved up and so he bought Glen Creek, but he was also an art collector, and so he had all these Lautrecs on his wall and all this stuff, and I used to spend the night out there, so I didn't have to spend the night in a motel to go forward with the sales meeting, and so we used to drink all this stuff the night before, and one night we had a bottle of like um, 75 um, fiddle. It was some some wine where Sutter Home used to buy. Um, I don't know if they still buy over there or not, but I got I got friends that still farm over there, and they sell to Sutter Home. They live in El Dorado County, and so anyway, we had this bottle from there. It was a 75 Zinfandel of some kind, and we drank a couple glasses and go, "Yeah, I can't drink it." Another thing, and so the next morning, um, when when before I was going to go to sales meetings, I don't know what struck me, but I tasted it and it hadn't broken, and that was the first time in my life I'd never ever experienced that. But and and Tom, you know, he got into computers and got out of the wine business. But in those days, he was the first one to make 18 liters. He made 18 liters of Sauvignon Blanc. And when he first did it, the wine was good. And so we go, whoa, I can really do something with this. But after a while, it tasted like gasoline. I remember one of my customers tasted, Mark, you got to taste this Sauvignon Blanc. It tastes like whiskey, and it did. It tastes a lot like whiskey.
That's amazing. Well, that's covered what I've want to cover. I don't have any other questions for you. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't talked about? Anything that I should have asked or that we didn't cover?
No, I think I probably talked too much about my life. Marianne's going to say we didn't talk enough about Oregon wine, but I think we talked about Oregon wine.
You did. I think we got it all covered here. Your life, Oregon wine, and compost, and the Dalai Lama. I mean, all kinds of things came up in this interview that I wasn't expecting. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I'm going to let you off the hook.
Thanks a lot. Great meeting you, Rich.